Hey, welcome everyone. Good morning. I'm Katie Burke, NAFSA Region 5 Education Abroad Short-Term Programs Liaison and host of this conference session. Thank you all for participating in the first ever NAFSA Region 5 virtual conference, and specifically this virtual presentation on strategies for student engagement in HyFlex and online courses, perspectives from ESL and study abroad programming. Just some brief information on how this is going to work. FYI, we are recording this session. Please stay muted while our presenters are talking. If you are given a chance to ask questions, be mindful of speaking time. Know that this can be a dialogue. We don't have all the answers for everything. If you do have questions, please use the chat box or for comments as well. And now, in the interest of time, I'm going to pass along to our other colleagues in NAFSA to introduce themselves, and then our session presenters, and they will get started. So, Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie Henquinet. I am the Teaching, Learning, and Scholarship Knowledge Community Representative for Region 5, and I just want to welcome you all to our session today.
Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Alyssa Lane and I'm the Communication Coordinator for NAFSA Region 5, and welcome everyone.
I'm Ellen Rosenwinkel. I am at IES Abroad. I'm the Registrar and Director of Ed Tech, and I'll be one of your presenters today.
Hi, and I'm Melissa Vervinck, and let me start the presentation by sharing our screen so that you can see what we'll be talking about today. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the warm introduction. So we will get started with our strategies for student engagement in HyFlex and online courses. So just as a way to introduce myself, my name is Melissa Vervinck. I am the director and instructor at Oakland University, which is in Rochester Hills, Michigan. I've been an educator for over 25 years, and I've taught at basically all levels from preschool through university, including adult education. And I have been at Oakland for about 12 years now. I started out as an instructor, became the program administrator as director, and then due to all of the wonderful changes that we are all currently experiencing, have gone back into the classroom and teaching again. So I also have a doctorate in educational technology, and I really didn't know at the time how valuable that degree was going to be for me, but I have definitely been putting that into use. And I'd now like to introduce Ellen Rosenwinkel, who will also be presenting with me.
Yes, thank you all for coming this morning. I'm the Director of Education Technology at IES, which is a study abroad provider based in Chicago. I've been with IES for over 12 years, and I've been in my role as Director of Ed Tech for the past 6. And primarily, we support our faculty and staff around the world in our 30+ study abroad locations in using education technology to kind of supplement our face-to-face programming. But of course, since March, we've been fully online. So we supported our faculty in transitioning to finishing out the semester online. We also offered a fully online program this summer and have some more plans for fully online study abroad virtual learning in the spring. So it's been a very busy time for us, as it has for all of you as well. So we're excited to share some of the things we've learned over the past year in particular. And then I think we wanted to learn a bit about you as well. So Alyssa is going to help us out by launching a poll so you can tell us a little bit about the roles at your institution that you have, and whether you're in education abroad, international student services, or something else. Looks like we have just a few faculty, so that's interesting to see. Great, thank you all so much. This is good to know. So for staff who are, looks like education abroad staff, you'll be interested in sharing these best practices with your faculty, I'm sure, as we move forward into 2021, trying to figure out what education abroad looks like where in an environment where students aren't currently able to travel. So hopefully we'll give some helpful information for you. And welcome to those of you in international student services and other areas as well. Thanks. All right, so I'll start today just by giving a definition for student engagement to kind of set the stage for what we'll be discussing. We're defining student engagement as students' motivation, attention, and interaction to optimize their learning. So when students are engaged, research has shown that they'll learn more and be more committed to the class. How do you do this? By providing meaningful content and activities and cultivating connection and relationship between instructor and student and among the students. Now, of course, that's much easier said than done. So we will, over the next hour, talk about some really practical strategies for doing that. And also we'd love to hear from you about what's working on in your areas as well. So one concept that we found really helpful at IES for our faculty as they think about how to create connection with students online is this idea of social presence. So social presence is the concept of presenting yourself and interacting as a real and whole person in the online environment. And obviously in the face-to-face class, that's really comes very naturally and doesn't require a lot of thought all the time. But in an online environment, you have to design your course and think about your interactions with students very, very intentionally to think about how you're going to present yourself as a three-dimensional person that can build a relationship with the students. You can do that by providing frequent, intentional, and multifaceted communication using carefully selected tools to do that. And in ed tech, it's very easy to get distracted by the tools themselves and to think that choosing the right tools will produce student learning. But it's really about the faculty member more than the tools is what we're going to argue here. And studies have shown that instructors' social presence is indeed correlated with increased student satisfaction, engagement, and student achievement in classes. So this is just kind of an interesting framework for us to keep in mind as we're designing courses and thinking about how to build a space where students can interact with one another. And in the interest of kind of bringing our whole selves to this presentation and getting to know you all, I'm going to invite you to participate in an interactive activity here. And I would like you to open a new web browser or use your phone to go to menti.com and enter the code 8965687 at the top of the screen here when you're prompted to do so. And Carrie's providing that address and code in the chat so you can copy and paste that. I'll give everyone a moment to get to the site. And then once you're here, you can share with us 1 to 3 words or short phrases to describe how you feel about the transition to remote learning. This is anonymous, so feel free to be honest and cut loose, though keep it clean. This may turn into a therapy session. We'll see how everyone responds here. Seeing challenging, uncertain, stressed for sure. I think especially in our field, uncertainty is just kind of the overwhelming feeling I know from a lot of folks. I see a couple positive things though. Hopeful, opportunity is popping up. So I see challenging, challenged, and we can think about challenging and opportunity going together, hopefully, in this presentation and talk about what we can do with these challenges. Ooh, one person wrote, I actually like it. Congratulations, that's wonderful. Zoom overload. Yeah, so we can imagine that students are feeling a lot of these same things as they were forced into the transition to remote learning as well. Thank you all for participating. Next, you'll be prompted, if you refresh your screen, you'll be prompted to enter a short answer talking about some of the challenges you faced with the transition to remote learning. These will pop up as kind of scrolling short answers. Again, it's anonymous, and I'll try to highlight a couple responses, but I will also be sharing all of the responses with the attendees with our notes at the end of the session. Lighting in the home office, very practical things. Yeah, bandwidth, Zoom fatigue a couple times. Yeah, adapting to finding new activities. kind of seeing two big categories. There's like the technology, learning how to use new things, figuring out what the best tools are, and then the relationship side, student engagement, lack of conversation, keeping students engaged. It's hard to stay focused for us, right? For us and for students, yeah. Participation, engagement. Yeah, we're harder to have casual conversations. We were actually just talking about that before the session began in the waiting room. It's wonderful we're able to connect virtually for this conference, but you do miss out on those kind of before and after the session chats, right? Kids at work, we were just talking about that as well. We're all in the same boat there. Great. Like I said, I'll share all of these notes in the PDF that will be available to you after the session. So thank you very much. So hopefully we'll be able to address some of these issues in the hour. Again, the combination of kind of the technology, there's the actual bandwidth issues, technology not working properly, but also just the question of what tech do you use? How do you use it? And how do you make it human? You want to use the technology to actually create connection and learning, right? It's not technology for technology's sake. Thank you all so much. I'll wait till we stop scrolling here and then move to the next one. Marketing's come up a couple times too. Baby in my lap during work. Yes, you're not alone, everybody. All right. So I think, like I said, we'll make these available to folks after the session. And I think I'll move on to the next question prompt. And that will kind of shift a little bit to asking folks to identify what opportunities you've identified over the last year as we've been making this transition. Wait till the scrolling stops though here. All right, so you'll be able to submit the answers you're working on now. And then if you refresh, you can answer the question, what opportunities have you identified with the transition to remote learning? At least one person says that they like it. So hopefully we'll have at least one person who's identified some opportunities here. And I hope we'll be able to provide you some more ideas as well for opportunities that have arisen out of this situation. Creativity and innovation, certainly. We're being forced to do that, right? Ability to redesign. I think that's been really important for us to think about what are the vital elements of a course. You know, really big questions. What is study abroad? What is higher education when you're not in person? Really big questions. Online students feel more included. Interesting. Finally, my institution is offering virtual programming. Yes, all the naysayers have had to come around, right? For those of us who have been enthusiastic about learning online. Learning new technology skills. Yep, we've all learned quite a bit. Increased access is huge, certainly. Accessibility, bringing the world to home. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and access, being able to talk to students more easily with Zoom. Wonderful. Cool. Well, it looks like at the very least, we've all learned quite a bit. And a lot of us have seen this as an opportunity for developing new skills, finding new ways to connect. And we'll talk a lot more about that through this session. And again, I'll share all of these ideas with you all at the end as well. So thank you so much for your participation in this Menti. It's a tool we really like to use with students as well. So something you can you can take home to your institution as well. And with that, I will pass it back to Melissa, and she can talk about some strategies for faculty making this transition. Oh, I think you're still muted there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's, technical problems. At least I didn't talk for 5 minutes before I realized that I was muted. I have done that, by the way. Anyway, I am kind of a glass is half full kind of person. So I really like to look at the positive things. So that's what I want to focus on first. What are the benefits from online teaching, which you just listed a whole bunch of them. And a lot of them are the same ones that I came up with too. For one thing, I think that I have learned how to be much more flexible with my students when it comes to scheduling and location. I have students who are attending my ESL classes who are face-to-face in my classroom with me. Others are attending live sessions because I'm also at the same time holding courses online, and I'm also recording them. So if students cannot attend the live sessions, they can also view these later. And sometimes even if they do attend, they still want to watch the video again later to review some of the information that I've shared. So in that respect, I've been able to reach students in a variety of different ways, and probably students that would not have been able to take courses otherwise. The second benefit is that I can see students work pretty easily because I ask them to share things like a Google Doc with me, or I have them complete work like on a Google slide. And what I do then is I can pop in as they are working or typing on their page, and I can make real-time comments to actually help guide their learning. So in that, I can really see what they're doing as they're doing it. And this is especially important, for instance, in a writing course where I can actually make comments as they're going through that first rough draft and actually help them at that point in time. So that really has been a benefit for me. It's not something I could do easily in a classroom. Yes, I could walk around and look at what they're doing, but the Google Doc allows me to have that real-time access as they're doing it, and also have a conversation with them on paper. I also use breakout sessions for this. I conference with my students while they're in the class. So I place them in their own breakout rooms, which sometimes at first students feel that this is kind of strange that they're going to their own room. But I do this because then when they're working on an assignment, I can pop in on them, talk to them individually, and be really frank and honest with them about their work, because I know no one else can hear what I am saying to them. And so that way I can actually really work with students and have kind of a office hours during class kind of feeling to it. Although one tip, if you do this, make sure that you turn your recording off, because you don't always want those recorded sessions with your individual students posted if you're posting class lectures online. Another advantage is I am reaching more students, as someone just mentioned in their comments, the positive reasons for doing this. I have parents I have students who are parents, they're juggling their schoolwork along with the responsibilities of parenting and their kids' schoolwork. And they may not have been able to take classes in any other way, but because I am recording my class, they can view it later and still keep up with their own classes. And I also have students who wanted to come to the United States, but were not able to do so for the fall semester, but they're still taking their ESL classes online from their home country. So they can continue to move forward, learning English, learning the language, moving towards their academic goals, even though they haven't been able to come to the US quite yet. And hopefully soon they will be able to do that and still be on the path towards that academic degree in a timely fashion. Another positive is that I'm teaching my students more than English. And I think this is very important because I'm helping them learn some workplace skills, which they need once they are in their academic courses, as well as when they are working in further careers. And to be honest, I think these skills that they're learning are very important for them. So they're learning the language, but they're also learning the tech skills and tools that they're going to need in the future. And so besides looking at this positive, I think it's also important for us to plan for the future and also to create materials that can be used no matter what happens. So these materials that we make and create for our courses can be created to be used with multiple classes. So Ellen and I discussed when we were talking about this presentation, how important it is for us to avoid citing specific texts or schedules in the videos that we create, because this really dates your video, so you can't use it again. So it's important to be able to create these videos that can be used in multiple ways in multiple circumstances. And I know I've created things that I forget about. So it's actually nice to go back over and review the materials you have created, and you may be pleasantly surprised by what you can reuse again for other courses. And for the last strategy, and I think this is actually one of the most important one for all of us, no matter if you're teaching or in study abroad, wherever, we have to set clear expectations and reasonable goals and deadlines for ourselves. And I communicate these with my students so that they know that on the weekends, it's going to take me a little bit longer to get back to them. And the same goes for that email they send me at 2 a.m. I have to have boundaries, and I think these boundaries are very important. I know it's easier said than done, but I do think it's important to mention this, that students need to know that these are the set things that you're able to do for them. And I think it's important for them to also see that it's okay to set boundaries for themselves too. Now, when it comes to actual course design, I think it's important to be mindful of exactly how you're going to communicate with your students, because I am teaching students who are face-to-face in my classroom as well as online synchronously and asynchronously. It's important for me to provide information in a way that's easy to navigate and for them to understand. So I really do limit my videos or online lectures to around less than 10 minutes. And I try to incorporate interactive elements into the lecture so students are actively doing something. I mean, just like the activity we just did with Ellen, this is a good way for students to actively be involved, just like you were responding to a question. I also use time with students for live discussions or practice so that students can use the information that they're learning. So I may have a conversation where students have to answer questions which focus on vocabulary words we're learning because I want them to use the words. And if they can't, then I'll continue to question them and get them to understand how to use the words and get them to produce the words in a normal, natural conversation. And I think this, I know it is more difficult for students to do than just matching a word to its definition, but it shows that they actually do know and understand the word. And also I vary the mode of communication. So, and this is actually a two-way street. So even though I will post videos or audio lectures for them to listen to, I also ask them to respond to me in writing or in a video. So one of my favorite sites is called Flipgrid. Students will create videos to respond to prompts. They can listen to other students' videos and also respond to those other students either in writing or posting another video back to them. And it's a good way to create conversation and actually allow students to kind of interact with each other in just a kind of different way. And lastly, I think providing feedback is a very important communication tool. It helps students to learn new information, and that feedback needs to be both formative and summative. So that formative feedback is when they're learning that concept and you're giving them feedback to help kind of guide that learning, and that summative feedback is given at the end, just to make sure that students understand the information that has been covered in the course. So with that, I'm gonna toss it back to Ellen.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. So I'll talk a bit about cultivating a learning community. So as we all know, education and learning doesn't happen with one-way communication from instructor to student. So in an online environment, if student engagement can really increase if they feel like they're a part of a community. So the first piece of advice we're giving is to provide opportunities for both student to student and student to teacher interaction, and to think really specifically, as Melissa mentioned, about how that interaction is going to take place both synchronously and asynchronously. We've already talked about the importance of providing space for students for unstructured conversation. In a language course, of course, that's going to help them practice their language skills, but in any course that helps build relationship. So to build that into your synchronous meetings can be really valuable. Also, you can use discussion forums for that unstructured conversation as well. I know many instructors have had success with kind of a general forum at the top of their course where students can post questions, or they may even post like an icebreaker or a topic of the week, like what shows is everybody watching, and students can talk to each other there just to get to know each other and create a sense of community. Discussion forums are probably the most used feature in the learning management system. And we found that if you give students really structured ways to participate in a forum, that can increase engagement and help them make meaningful contributions. So tell them, give them very specific prompts and set your expectations for how you'd like them to respond to or rate other students' responses. Collaborative documents are a really great tool that we can use for synchronous and asynchronous learning in the online environment. So collaborative documents can be used asynchronously if you have students working in groups on assignments, but also during a breakout session, you could have students working on a Google Doc or a page like a, what's the one, Melissa, that's Padlet. We've been talking about this one. Padlet's another one where students can just write ideas and they appear live and multiple users can be contributing at the same time. And that allows you as the instructor to pop in on different groups and see the progress that they're making on the questions or the worksheet or whatever you're providing for them. And also at the end of the 15-minute breakout, you have a product that you can then share with others and post in the course even for reference later. So those can be really great tools. We've talked about breakout rooms already, student groups and one-on-one between the instructor and a student. Also, providing video and audio feedback as the instructor can be a great way to cultivate a sense of community and humanity when you're assessing student work. So instead of just providing a numeric grade and maybe written comments to a student, within many LMSs, it's pretty easy to record a video or audio snippet telling the student, what you thought of their work, what recommendations you have, what worked great. And it can just remind students that they're not submitting material into a void, that it's a person that they're interacting with and a person is assessing their learning. So this is all kind of coming back to this idea of making it personal. So we also would recommend, sharing personal experiences, talk about why you're passionate about the subject that students are studying. And you can even talk about what's going on in your life, do icebreakers at the beginning of class, even if they seem cheesy, but they work, and encouraging students to share personal experiences and connect the content of the course to their lives as well. Creating an introductory forum can be really helpful to set the tone for this being a place where people are coming as whole people that can be three-dimensional and sharing about themselves. You can also use Flipgrid, which is a tool for posting short videos. And Melissa actually shared this great idea. So instead of having an introductory written forum, you can set up a space in Flipgrid, which is a free tool. I'm not sure if there's even a paid version, but I've never hit the limit of capacity in it. And you can basically set up a password protected space that students can visit. And then could not be easier to just click one button and it starts recording and you just can record a short introduction message. And as Melissa pointed out, the big benefit here is you can hear students pronounce their own names so that you know how to address them in class. And they can just post a short video and they can respond to others' videos. And it's a really cool tool. Also, just throughout the course, you can prompt students to share information about where they are to kind of bring personal experiences and personal connection into the content. So you could have them talk about the weather where they are, share information about their hometown. What did you do this weekend? What time is it where you are? That could be an interesting thing to just talk about to remind students that they're a part of a community that's made up of individuals that have full lives as part of the course. And then next, one controversial issue in online learning: to webcam or not to webcam. It seems to me that most faculty universally want their students to have their webcams on because it can really enhance communication and it helps the faculty member know if the students are paying attention, if they're looking really confused, if they're nodding off, that's good information for the instructor to have that you would have in a face-to-face room. And even for students, it just, again, reminds them that they're part of a learning community. It's not just them watching a YouTube video. They're actually talking to people and interacting with people. But there are some very legitimate concerns with requiring students to use their webcams. With so many people learning and working from home, there are serious bandwidth limitations for some people, so they may not be able to stream video. Also, students may not be comfortable sharing the space where they're studying. Some students may have an office basically where they're able to work in a quiet, private environment. Some may be working in their car, streaming internet from the library. So students may not be comfortable sharing their environment. And there also may be privacy concerns with others in the home. If they have siblings or other relatives like walking around behind them, maybe they don't want to turn their video on for that reason. So personally, I'm not really in favor of requiring it or being punitive if students don't turn their webcams on. But I think there are some strategies you can employ to encourage it and to overcome some of these issues. First of all, establishing a welcoming and personal environment as the instructor and setting the tone basically by sharing your own webcam and saying, I would love to see everybody's faces. And I know that you're not necessarily going to be in a perfectly quiet environment, and neither am I. So if we see a dog come into the frame, that's fine. You know, if we hear some background noise, mute yourself, but don't feel like you need to turn off your camera or be embarrassed if there's interruptions. That's just part of everyone being remote right now. You can also encourage students to use virtual backgrounds, and you know, that can give students a little bit more privacy and create a more even playing field for students who are concerned about what's going on in the background. And I've heard some faculty have success with actually asking students to have themed virtual backgrounds. So like we have a sports management instructor who has asked students to choose a sporting venue and put that as their background. And then at the beginning of class, everyone describes what they chose and why. So it's kind of an icebreaker, also encourages students to be on video and connects it to the course content. So you can really get creative with those kinds of ideas. If students are not going to be using webcams for whatever reason, we'll offer a few alternatives to kind of fill the gap in some of those ways. The first is to have students choose an avatar, or at least like a profile picture, which you can do in most video conference tools, so that you're not at least talking to a black box or just like a person's name. Some instructors will even ask students to choose an avatar on a theme, or like an avatar that describes, you know, how they're feeling that week, and then they can talk about it, just so that you know, it's again kind of an icebreaker and brings some personal content into the course. You can also ask students to turn on their webcam and show something that's not their face, like show an object that's near to them that's important to them, or what's the view out their window, and they can talk about that to just bring a sense of space again into the online environment. And also, you could have students record asynchronous videos using Flipgrid, as I mentioned, or a lot of learning management systems will allow students to record asynchronous videos in a forum or other tool. And this won't get at the issue of instructors, instructors wanting to be able to see student engagement during a synchronous session, but it does help just create a sense of community and help people get to know each other when they can see their colleagues on video, even if they're viewing it asynchronously. So we're going to do another quick poll here. We wanted to ask you all if you usually use your webcam in meeting with students, and if you require your students to turn on their webcams as well. And feel free to write your thoughts on this, and we're hopefully going to have time at the end for questions. I feel like this question of webcams comes up quite a bit when we start talking about online learning with challenges and figuring out what to do. It looks like all of you are using your webcams as students, which is what we expected, and you're not requiring students to do that, most of you. So, okay. Thank you very much. As I said, hopefully we'll have time at the end to answer any questions if you all want to talk more about this hot topic. And with that, I'll pass it back to Melissa.
Sorry, I had to get my two screens working here. So anyway, no, I found that very interesting. And just really quickly, before we end the webcam or not to webcam debate, I do not require my students to turn on their webcams. And that's because, as I said, there are students who are in China and other countries that may or may not be able to because of bandwidth and limitations like that. I can say it's difficult at times, and I do appreciate when students do turn on their cameras because it is a lot easier to teach. But and I'm still struggling with it. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. So anyway, going on with technology, I think, and we know we were all inundated with all of these different technology tools back in March and April for us to use for free. And I think it's very easy for us to get lost in all of these opportunities. But it's also important to remember that what we're teaching, that content, as well as our teaching techniques, our pedagogy, is just as important as the technology. So technology should not be driving your educational decisions in the classroom. And I'm not going to go into the TPAC framework, but if you're interested in kind of that balance, I would highly suggest TPAC, which is a framework by Mishra and Kohler, to look into that, about being able to strike that balance between technology, pedagogy, and then content knowledge. A few of the things that Ellen and I did discuss about how to best help individual students are listed on this slide. I mean, we use things such as quick knowledge checks, reflection journals, and digital notebooks. That last one, a digital notebook, is something that I use this term with my ESL students. It's actually a Google Slide template notebook. And what I do is make it basically looks like a composition notebook, and then different pages are in that based on the activities I want them to do. At the beginning of the term, they make a copy of this notebook, share it with me, and then they use it throughout the term so they can record different information about weekly assignments I require them to do. And then once that is shared with me, I can go in periodically and kind of check up on their learning and make comments, as well as check to make sure they're completing all the assignments that I'm giving them to do. We also discussed ways to check for understanding when teaching asynchronously. These included using the discussion forums for students to post their own responses, as well as having students evaluate each other's work and to collaborate on projects. We've talked about some very good tools already that are out there to use, like Padlet and Google Docs. And I also plan group projects for students because I want to build a sense of community and give students the opportunity to work with others. I don't want them working alone all of the time. And you will see sometimes I have face-to-face students working with online students because it's a great way for them to get to know each other. And also I don't have to worry about face-to-face students working together in the classroom and having to stay 6 feet apart. So it's a great opportunity to kind of build a classroom community for everyone who's involved in the class. When they're working synchronously together, they do need to do more than just listen to an instructor lecture. And that's why I think the breakout rooms for small groups are important so they can talk to each other. As an instructor, I can pop in and out of those breakout rooms. I also will have group leaders who are more advanced language students who lead discussions. And what I do with that student is actually move them from room to room so they can talk and monitor each small group. And that way, and I can literally physically move them so they can move throughout the different groups that they're kind of working with. I also use polls like we just did with the presentations, as well as other technology tools. And we've talked about quite a few. And I think that interactive element is extremely important. For instance, Mentimeter, which we used at the beginning, I had never used it before, but I have a feeling it's going to be finding its way into my classroom. So, and then another thing that I think we also need to look at, another viewpoint, is that we have to support our students. And I think it's very important to mention this. They know how to learn in a face-to-face environment. They had been doing it from their K through 12 experience, no matter where they've been learning in the world. But now we're asking them to actually move into an online environment, and their bandwidth to function in this environment may be a little bit more limited because we're trying to ask them to do things in a way that they're not used to, as well as learning new content. So we kind of have to allow for this. I think self-motivation, organization, and being proactive when communicating with their instructor or peers are really extremely important skills that they may have to develop and hone to a level that they have not had to before, especially the self-motivation when they're not coming to a classroom in order to learn, that they actually have to go online and kind of take control of that learning themselves. So we really do have to help them develop these skills. As instructors, we cannot just throw a bunch of new sites at them without helping them actually learn how to use them. I know we've talked about how our students are digital natives, and that's a term that we've heard over and over, but they really still do need help with some of the technology. Really think about the tools that you want them to use. Is it something that they will be using multiple times during your course or only once? And if it's something that's only once, really think about, is it worth it to take the time for students to learn that tech tool? And I really encourage you to allow them time to explore. For instance, Jamboard is a whiteboard that I use with students, an interactive whiteboard where students can also make comments on the same thing that I'm making comments on. When I used it, before I even began the lesson, I actually let the students play around with it. So they knew how to use the pen and the eraser, how to type text on it. I actually was playing tic-tac-toe with some of the students while others were making pictures and things like that. So once they had time, and it only took us a couple minutes for them to play around and learn the tool, then we were ready to jump into that grammar lesson. But this way, at least they understood the tool before I actually tried to start teaching them something. So I think that's important for us to really allow time and think about what we're asking the students to do, because sometimes it is a lot more steps than what we actually think about when we first kind of throw the tool at them. So anyway, back to Ellen.
Right. So since we are all in international education, we wanted to highlight some ways where we could infuse online courses with culture, which is important for us, of course. In face-to-face classes, it's can seem a lot easier, but there's definitely ways to do that online. So here's a list of just some ideas for ways instructors can provide cultural content and activities for students in the online environment. And the first is pretty obvious. It's to include a variety of resources from the target culture. So short stories, articles, case studies, films, etc., to give students a well-rounded exposure to diverse voices from the target culture. Also, guest speakers, there are actually probably more opportunities for guest speakers now with moving online, bringing guest speakers into your class for synchronous sessions or for pre-recorded lectures with then a live Q&A. And the same could be said for talking to, like, doing virtual business visits is something we've been talking about. So having individuals from a business in another country talk about what they do. Sharing your screen for a Google Street View walking tour is something a lot of our faculty have done. So in a synchronous meeting, you can just walk through the neighborhood and point out, buildings and things of note to students that you would do on a walking tour. And actually, I noticed in the Menti, someone had noted that they have had students do that. So walk everyone else through their hometown and talk about, points of interest there, which is a really cool idea. We've had faculty also create video or audio recordings on location to kind of fill in the gap for the field study that the students would have been doing on site in their study abroad program. So even in like March and April, when we rapidly shift to teaching online, we had faculty doing this. So one of my favorites was an environmental studies instructor in Germany who went into the Black Forest, and he just had a friend use his iPhone to make these short videos. And I don't think faculty need to feel pressure to create something of super high quality as far as like the video production goes, because the value that they're bringing isn't producing an amazing film, but it's the content of what they're delivering. And so we saw some really cool videos coming out of our study abroad locations in the spring, where you could just see the environment and see the excitement that brings to the faculty member too, when they're talking about like the flora and fauna in the Black Forest. It was very cool. If that isn't possible, short of that, faculty could also collect images and videos that already exist and curate those and narrate kind of a field study over existing videos that they find or images. And then also for all courses, you could be mindful of introducing and decoding local slang and vernacular, which is of course a given in a language course, but even in other disciplines, that's a great way to bring in the culture, to introduce some vocabulary words or some slang that might be kind of fun and interesting for students and give them a more well-rounded idea of the topic in the host country or culture. And then here's another list of ideas for how students can explore the culture independently, which is something they, of course, are doing on study abroad programs. And if international students are in the US, they're doing that every day. But there are a few ways you could prompt students to do it virtually as well. And the first is to give students assignments that require them to search and curate photos, music, art, articles, films, etc., related to the course content from that country. And in doing so, not only are they going to present something interesting to the class, but they're going to have to sift through a lot of other content too and get a wider exposure to different media. You could have students participate in a digital scavenger hunt along those same lines. If there's an opportunity for students to interview or collaborate with students in another culture, that could be really valuable and easy to do online now if you have willing participants on both sides. Students can explore collections on museum websites. Many museums now have very robust collections online, and if you're like me, you received many listicles about museums you could visit from your couch back in March and April. Those can be great teaching tools. And then finally, you could have students follow social media accounts and share interesting posts with the class too. And if you have any other ideas, please type them in the chat. I see Airbnb has done some cool virtual tours of cities. I have not checked those out. That's very cool. And yeah, if you search online, you can really do some interesting kind of, there's some even VR city kind of tours that exist. Oh, so the digital scavenger hunt. So one of our instructors has done these where they'll tell a student to find like an image of, like maybe they'll give students, 5 tasks of find an image of this specific food that's, a signature dish in Granada, and then find a piece of music that includes this word, in Spanish, things like that. So you could kind of give students an impetus to explore the culture on their own and then bring things back in a forum. And there's, I think, a lot of creativity you could infuse into that activity. All right, so feel free to continue adding ideas or questions, and I will hand it back to Melissa here.
Okay, so we've actually mentioned quite a few ideas. We haven't labeled them as hybrid flexible kind of ideas, but I think these are things that you can take into a hybrid flexible model. And what a HyFlex course means is that you're kind of doing what I'm doing. I'm teaching students who are face-to-face in my classroom, as well as students who are online synchronously and students who are asynchronously online. So for example, I try to do things to make sure that everyone has the same type of experience and the same type of learning. So I may have a discussion in the class with my face-to-face students and my live online students, but then I will also post that same question in an online discussion board. So that way students who are watching the video can also share their ideas on the same topic. And I actually sometimes have the students who attend the face-to-face class find they have more to add to the conversation. So they will actually post to the discussion forum too. So which is a nice way for students to kind of interact with each other. I do admit that tracking students who attend when and those additional assignments is difficult, and I'm still trying to work through that. So I do not have a solution for it. I do think part of the solution, though, is that I need to give more control and responsibility to students for their own learning. So that's where I need to kind of step back and realize that my role in this is more to kind of, guide them and not be the person who knows all the content. So as for the things that have helped me when it comes to this hybrid flex model that I've been teaching in, as I've already mentioned, the one I guess I want to highlight the most, though, or I've talked about the digital notebooks, I've talked about the questions with the breakout rooms, but then I want to talk about the selective grading and what I kind of mean by that. For instance, selective grading means that I don't grade everything. I wouldn't do that if it was a face-to-face classroom, and I can't do that even in an online environment. And I have seen, someone posted the other day, they were staying up till like 1 or 2 a.m. to try to grade things, and they still weren't getting things graded. I think you do have to be very selective in this, and once again, give some of that responsibility to the students. I do grade things and move the learning forward for students. And I do give feedback to students on what they're doing as they're doing it. And honestly, there are some things that I don't grade at all because it's things that they're doing for practice. So to me, those are things that we may go over and explain things, but then they need to take it and build on that. I do think it's extremely important, though, to set a schedule. Just like my students, time management is something that I've had to struggle with. If I don't follow a schedule, then I'm going to be in trouble too, and I'm going to feel overwhelmed. And at times it has happened. So students need to know that you are going to have a schedule that you're sticking to. So, and it's not just for grading, it's also for things such as starting class. Students need to know that you're going to start class on time and you expect them to be there. However, you also have to plan for the fact that they may have technology problems or may not be able to log on. I mean, we've all had that where you think you're logging on and then all of a sudden you have an update or something happen to your computer. So I always kind of plan for things at the beginning of class that they may be able to make up later if there's issues or problems. So for instance, in my writing class, we always start with a timed daily writing. So students know they're going to be writing for at least 5 to 10 minutes on a topic. And they know that if they miss that for some reason, they can make that up later. So it gives them a few minutes of being able to log on and knowing that they're not going to miss anything. Especially, I don't try to do specific direct instruction within the first 5 minutes of class. It is a time, if you're in a regular classroom, that you would be doing activities like I just described, and also talking to students and getting to know them. So I kind of, some of those activities kind of bleed over into what I'm actually doing too. I do use one recurring link for Zoom for the entire term. I set that up at the very beginning. I share it with students via calendars, as well as post it at the top of the learning management system that we use. So students know that they can go to that link, and it's the same one for the entire term, which makes it very easy for them to know where to go and where to find me. And it also means even on days that they may not be meeting live with me or scheduled, that they can log on to that link and probably find me and ask me a quick question. And also, as I said earlier, I do record all the classes, and I try to post those promptly every afternoon so that students who did miss class are able to keep up with things, because I do require them to do things each day in order to be prepared for the next day. So looking at the time, it looks like we do have a few minutes for questions, and then to check to see what else is in the chat that I may have missed.
I know someone asked a question about paywalls for Mentimeter and other interactive presentation tools, and I can actually share with you. I pulled up a couple that I like. So Mentimeter, here's kind of the payment structure, and so you can have an unlimited audience size with a free account, but it limits you on the number of questions. But another tool I really like is called Nearpod, and this was mentioned in our presentation as well. And with that one, with the free account, you're limited on the number of students who can join each session, but there's a ton of different really interesting, engaging question types you can do, and there's no limit to that. And that one also has virtual city tours built into it. They're not really tours. They're like, it's like a 3D view. So you could kind of like a 360 view rather. So that's kind of a cool feature, especially if you're trying to talk about introduce students to a new location. So Nearpod is definitely one to check out. And then many of you may already be familiar with Kahoot. This one's like a much more basic one-trick pony kind of tool, but I will tell you from experience, like kindergartners love it, college students love it, members of our academic council and my colleagues love it. Like it's basically a competitive interactive quiz game, and you can create multiple choice questions. Everyone participates on their phone or web browser, and after each question, like there's a leaderboard, and so that can be just like a 2-minute activity to get students' attention either at the beginning of class or an orientation session. I know we've used those for like info sessions and things like that. So if you don't know it yet, use Kahoot.
Is that one free also, Ellen?
Yeah. I think the limit is like 500 users or something. So don't quote me on that, but it is free and you can use it for large groups.
Great.
If anyone else has questions or ideas of like what's working for you, we'd love to hear that as well in the chat. Or if you'd like to speak, we can unmute you as well.
Yeah, if you want to raise your hand or just go ahead and unmute yourself, and we can kind of keep an eye on that as well. Sometimes that's easier than chat.
And thank you, Brianna, for that Airbnb thing. I actually checked that out just now. It looks really cool.
Another tool I just mentioned, if anyone's still typing, that we're going to use in the TLS roundtable right after this is called Mural. And that one is nice because I've used Jamboard with the Google Suite, but there are some limits on the number of users for big groups. We use that, and that one does have a fee, but it's fairly minimal. So we've gotten our department to subscribe to that, and then there's unlimited users on a whiteboard. Any other questions? Anyone wants to chime in? Someone's looking for the Airbnb link. We can certainly repost that. And the chat, yeah, the chat kind of disappears when you get kicked off.
Here's the article that Brianna shared. Cool.
I'm sorry, that's the wrong, mine was the wrong link, sorry.
Well, if nobody has any other comments or questions, we will wrap up a few minutes early. I just wanted to talk about some upcoming events that NAFSA is hosting. So actually right after this session is the Teaching, Learning, and Scholarship, the TLS Roundtable. I think that's at 10:30. Central Standard Time. And there's another 6 virtual sessions for the NAFSA Region 5 virtual conference. So please be sure there's definitely still time to sign up for those. October 29th, there's a collegial event on the topic of diversity and inclusion in education abroad offices. And then actually, I think just yesterday, NAFSA sent out an email about their International Education Week 2020 different events that they are hosting. So please check that out. That's November 16th through 20th. So thank you very much for participating in this session. Thank you to our presenters, Ellen and Melissa. Great information, very engaging also. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.